Rain lashed against the long windows of St. Augustine's private hospital, its rhythmic tapping echoing through the empty corridor like fingers drumming on a coffin lid. A single lamp flickered above the nurse's station, casting trembling shadows onto polished linoleum floors. At precisely 2 minutes past midnight, Nurse Evelyn Marsh discovered the lifeless body of Dr. Adrian Vale, St. Augustine's most celebrated surgeon, collapsed beside the locked narcotics cabinet, his eyes glassy, his expression frozen in quiet disbelief. A scent of lavender hung strangely in the air. Chapter 1. A Death in the Night. Rain had a peculiar way of falling over St. Augustine's private hospital, soft and whispering at first, as though politely requesting entry, then battering the windows with the insistence of a persistent creditor demanding repayment from the living. By dawn, the storm had settled into a steady drizzle, casting a gray, muted pall over the white stone building that stood resolute at the edge of the English countryside. The trees bowed beneath the wet wind. The gravel path sparkled like polished jet. And down that path, a sleek black motor car rolled slowly forward, its wheels slicing gently through rainwater. Inside, Hercule Poirot raised a gloved hand to adjust his mustaches, a gesture which to him was as necessary as setting a clock. Captain Hastings, seated beside him, leaned forward to peer at the grand building ahead. "So this is St. Augustine's," Hastings remarked, wiping condensation from the glass. "Looks respectable enough. Hardly the place one expects murder." Poirot gave a soft hump. "Mon ami, murder occurs in the most respectable places. In fact, I insist upon it. To the murderer, elegance is merely decoration, opportunity is what he seeks." Hastings sighed. "Still, a hospital. One would think people here are trying to prevent death." Poirot lifted a finger. "Precisely, Hastings. Therefore, when death arrives unexpectedly, it is all the more suspect." The motor car came to a stop beneath the long awning. A lone figure stepped forward, a stern woman in navy uniform with a face carved from restrained propriety. She appeared as unshakable as a metronome. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, I am Matron Lydia Hargreaves. Thank you for coming so quickly." Her voice was crisp, the syllables cutting neatly through the damp air. Poirot tipped his hat. "Madame, your message spoke of urgency. A man is dead, a doctor no less." "Yes, Dr. Adrian Vale, our senior surgeon." Her gaze flickered toward the entrance, then back to Poirot. Behind her sternness lay palpable tension. "If you will follow me, I will show you the location where he was discovered." Hastings muttered to Poirot as they walked. "She seems the sort who'd scold a corpse for being late to its own funeral." Poirot hid a smile. "Such discipline is admirable in a hospital, Hastings, but it also hides emotion. We must watch her closely." They entered the main corridor where white tiles gleamed with such precision they might have been polished by angels. The scent of antiseptic floated through the air, crisp, cold, almost hostile. Poirot paused, his head tilting. "Already I smell something amiss," Hastings sniffed. "Smells perfectly normal to me." Poirot waved a hand. "Not the odors of medicine, my friend. I speak of the emotion, the tension that grips these walls. You shall see." Matron Hargreaves led them into a narrow hall lit by a single overhead lamp. The shadows it cast trembled like nervous patients awaiting news. She stopped before a heavy door labeled "Narcotics Storage, Authorized Staff Only." "The body was found here at 2 minutes past midnight," she said. "Nurse Evelyn Marsh discovered him during her rounds." "And the door, was it locked?" Poirot asked. "From the inside," Hargreaves replied. Hastings blinked. "Locked from the inside? Then it must have been suicide." Poirot gave a quiet sigh of disappointment, as though Hastings had just declared that the moon was made of boiled potatoes. Suicide? In a locked room with no note, with the body found sprawled in a position of distress rather than repose. And as Matron has stated, with the narcotics cabinet untouched, though the key lay at his side? Non, mon ami, do not leap to conclusions, it wrinkles the truth. Hastings flushed but nodded. A constable outside the door stepped aside, allowing them entry. Inside, the room was small, barely wide enough for 2 carts, and smelled faintly of polish and something else. Poirot inhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a moment. "Do you smell it?" he asked. Hastings sniffed again. "Disinfectant, ink, damp wool. Honestly, Poirot—" "Lavender," Poirot finished quietly. His eyes opened. But faintly, not as perfume applied on the person, but as scent recently released. Hargreaves frowned. "Lavender? None of our staff wear scents on duty." Poirot nodded. "Just so." He approached the sheet-covered body in the center of the room. Constable Reeves lifted the cloth. Dr. Adrian Vale lay pale and still. His hair, once neatly combed, was disheveled. His spectacles were bent. A faint bruise marked the side of his temple. Poirot crouched, adjusting the position of the body slightly, examining the expression frozen upon Vale's face. "You see, Hastings? This is not the face of a man who gently resigns himself to death. There is surprise here, and fear." Poirot rose and turned to the room itself. It was immaculate. Clean shelves, neatly labeled vials, precisely folded linen on a storage table. But on the tiled floor lay 3 curious items. A mother-of-pearl button gleaming faintly in the dim light. A broken fountain pen, its nib bent and ink dried like a wound. A smudge of violet powder on the narcotics cabinet handle. Poirot approached each with the reverence of an archaeologist discovering ancient relics. "This button," he said, lifting it with his handkerchief. "Exquisite craftsmanship, most likely from evening wear, not hospital attire, but sometimes vanity invades even the most sterile halls." He gestured toward the broken pen. "Dr. Vale was known for his meticulous records, yes? His penmanship." Matron Hargreaves nodded stiffly. "Indeed. He wrote everything with great precision." "Then it is unlikely he would break his pen voluntarily." A struggle occurred, a brief one, but a struggle nonetheless. Poirot moved to the violet stain. He touched it lightly with his handkerchief. "Cosmetic powder. Common among ladies, but for it to be here upon the cabinet handle. Curious, no?" Hargreaves shivered. "Mr. Poirot, are you suggesting—" "I suggest nothing yet," he replied softly. "I merely observe." He stood in the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back, turning slowly. His eyes catalogued every detail: the angle of the fallen lamp, the trace of scuff marks near the cabinet, the faint irregularity in the dust by the baseboard. "Matron Hargreaves," Poirot said at last, "tell me of Dr. Vale." Her expression tightened. "He was brilliant, driven, not always easy but irreplaceable." "A man of enemies?" She hesitated. "This is a hospital, Mr. Poirot. People disagree, tensions arise. That does not make them enemies." Poirot gave a polite nod. "And yet, a man does not die without someone wishing it." Hastings cleared his throat. "Who discovered him again?" "Nurse Evelyn Marsh," Hargreaves replied. "She is very shaken. I can send for her." "Please," Poirot said. As the matron departed, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. "Do you suspect her?" Poirot lifted a brow. "Mon ami, I suspect everyone, even you occasionally." Before Hastings could protest, the door opened and a young woman entered, pale, trembling, her uniform slightly wrinkled. Her eyes were red from weeping. "Nurse Evelyn Marsh," she whispered, as though introducing herself to a priest rather than a detective. I found him." Poirot approached gently. "Mademoiselle, you were on your rounds?" Yes, I was checking the night logs and medication counts. When I passed this room, the light was on. It should not have been. So you entered? I knocked first. No answer. I opened the door. He was lying there. Her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. I screamed. I must have screamed. Poirot nodded sympathetically. Mademoiselle, breathe. Did you touch anything? No. Only his shoulder to see if he was alive. Then I ran for the matron. Very good. Now tell me, did you notice anything unusual earlier in the evening? She hesitated, eyes darting nervously toward the constable and Hastings. Poirot stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do not fear, mademoiselle. The truth harms only the guilty. She swallowed. Dr. Vale seemed anxious, distracted. He never frightened easily, but last night he paced for nearly an hour. He kept checking the corridor. For someone? I think so. For whom? She shook her head. I cannot say. But I heard raised voices from his office at about 10 o'clock. Could not make out the words, only that Dr. Vale was angry. Poirot's eyes sharpened. With whom was he speaking? Nurse Marsh trembled. I should not. Mademoiselle, Poirot said softly. A man is dead. The time for modesty has passed. She lowered her gaze. It was Dr. Grantham, Hastings exhaled sharply. The junior surgeon? Nurse Marsh nodded. They have disagreed before, but never like this. It was terrible. Dr. Vale threatened to... She stopped suddenly, fear tightening her throat. To do what? Poirot urged. Her whisper was barely audible. To ruin his career. Poirot nodded slowly, thoughtfully, as though confirming something already suspected. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. She left with shaky steps. Hastings turned to Poirot. Sounds like motive, if you ask me. Poirot twirled one end of his mustache. Perhaps, he said. But passion is only one ingredient in the recipe for murder. He stepped back to the center of the room, closed his eyes and inhaled once more. The lavender, he murmured again, placed not to soothe, but to mislead. Hastings frowned. But why lavender? Poirot opened his eyes, and they shone with quiet certainty. Because, mon ami, our murderer possesses vanity, and vanity leaves a trail more distinct than footprints. He stared down at the button gleaming on the floor, at the broken pen, at the faint trace of powder, at the locked door. Someone, Poirot said softly, has crafted an illusion. And Hercule Poirot, he does not fall for illusions. He knelt before the cabinet, running a fingertip above the handle, but not touching it. There, he whispered. Hastings knelt beside him. What is it? Poirot's gaze sharpened. A clue, Hastings, a very small clue. But in this case, the smaller the clue, the greater the truth. A faint smile curved his lips. For I believe, mon ami, that our murderer is not merely a hand guided by anger, but by fear. He rose, straightened his coat, and announced with quiet gravity, Come, Hastings, we must meet Dr. Felix Grantham. Chapter 2. The suspects assemble. A hospital at dawn possesses a peculiar kind of stillness, an uneasy hush between night's suffering and day's determined order. But this morning the hush bore teeth. Whispers flitted like nervous birds through the corridors. Nurses avoided eye contact. The very walls seemed to hold their breath. Hercule Poirot strode through the long east wing behind Matron Hargreaves, his steps making soft rhythmic taps on the polished floors. Captain Hastings followed, trying and failing to look inconspicuous while glancing curiously at the staff who peered from doorways. Word travels quickly, Hastings murmured. They all know something is wrong. Poirot nodded. Fear, Hastings, spreads faster than gossip. If the murderer walks these halls, the others will sense it, even if they cannot name it. Matron Hargreaves stopped before a modest conference room. I have assembled the individuals you requested. They are anxious. Good, Poirot said. Anxiety loosens the tongue. The matron opened the door. Inside sat 4 figures who seemed to embody 4 different responses to grief. Trembling confusion, simmering anger, cool detachment, and stiff defensiveness. Poirot surveyed them with a polite bow. Mesdames et messieurs, thank you for joining me. I require only the truth, nothing more. He motioned toward the trembling young woman seated closest to him. Evelyn Marsh clutched a cup of cooling tea in both hands, her knuckles pale. Even seated, she seemed to shrink into her uniform, her eyes flicking nervously from Poirot to the door. You have already spoken to me, Mr. Poirot, she said softly. But I will answer whatever else you need. Poirot sat opposite her. Mademoiselle, your honesty this morning was admirable, but I must ask, did you fear Dr. Vale? Her breath caught. Fear? No, not fear. He was intense, yes, but he valued good work. He pushed us, but not cruelly. And yet you heard him arguing last night? She nodded. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. The door was ajar. I only heard fragments, but Dr. Vale sounded furious. With Dr. Grantham? Yes. Poirot leaned closer, his voice gentle. Did Dr. Vale have enemies, mademoiselle? Beyond this disagreement? Her gaze dropped to her lap. He made people uncomfortable at times. His ambition, his expectations. Some thought he was too willing to push boundaries. Scientific boundaries? Hastings asked. Nurse Marsh hesitated. Yes, and ethical ones. Poirot absorbed this with a slow, thoughtful nod. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. You may rest for now. Evelyn sank back in relief but remained pale and shaken. If Evelyn Marsh was a portrait of fragile nerves, Dr. Felix Grantham was the opposite. Handsome in a proud, angular way, dressed impeccably, posture taut with indignation. His jaw was clenched so tightly one might have mistaken him for a sculpted figure. Let us dispense with pleasantries, Grantham snapped before Poirot even addressed him. You believe I killed Adrian Vale? Poirot raised his brows, mildly amused. Ah, but Dr. Grantham, I have accused no one. You didn't need to. Your questions to Nurse Marsh were transparent. Hastings leaned forward. You did argue with him last night. Grantham's throat worked. For a moment, anger warred with fear behind his eyes. Yes, he said at last. We argued, vehemently. Adrian Vale was attempting to block my proposed research trial. Work I have spent 2 years preparing. He wanted to stop it for personal reasons. Professional jealousy. Poirot tilted his head. Jealousy or concern for safety? Safety was merely his excuse, Grantham retorted. Vale wanted the glory. He always wanted the glory. Poirot's gaze flicked to the cuff of Grantham's coat. You are missing a button. Grantham stiffened. Is that a crime, Mr. Poirot? Buttons fall, threads fray. Indeed, Poirot said mildly. And yet this button, I think, fell quite violently. Grantham stood abruptly. I will not be interrogated like a criminal. I found Dr. Vale arrogant, overbearing, and infuriating, but murder. Ridiculous. Poirot observed the man silently, noting the sheen of sweat along his hairline. Perhaps you feel cornered, Doctor. By Vale in life, and now by suspicion in his death? Grantham's voice thinned. I will speak with you again when my counsel arrives. He sat, arms folded tightly as though afraid he might fall apart if he loosened even a finger. If the others carried tension, Helena Vale carried ice. Impeccably dressed in a tailored black coat with a strand of pearls tight around her throat, she watched Poirot with unreadable detachment. Her beauty was striking. but her eyes held an exhaustion far older than grief. "Madame Vale," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "My condolences for your loss." Her lips curved faintly, not in gratitude but in a polite acknowledgement of the formality. "My husband and I," she said calmly, "have been estranged for nearly a year. You need not spare my feelings." "Estranged, yes," Poirot replied, "but present at the hospital within hours of his death. I was contacted by Matron Hargreaves," she said, "and while our marriage was broken, I am not made of stone. Adrian was significant to me once." Poirot nodded. "And in recent days? Did you see him?" She inhaled, held the breath, and exhaled slowly, as though considering what could safely be said. "We spoke several days ago," she replied. "He seemed troubled, paranoid even. He hinted at someone threatening him." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Someone?" "Yes." A pause, then. He would not say who. Poirot leaned closer. "Madame, your gloves. May I see them?" She arched a perfectly sculpted brow but complied, setting them on the table. Poirot examined them delicately. "Scratches on the clasp," he murmured, "and a faint violet residue beneath the nails." Her voice iced over. "I wear powder, Mr. Poirot. I am a woman, not a suspect." Poirot returned the gloves with a bow. "Every woman is capable of murder, madame, as is every man." Her eyes narrowed just slightly, but she remained silent. Porter Briggs sat at the far end of the table, broad-shouldered, nervous, and twisting his cap between trembling fingers. He was the sort of man who seemed permanently apologetic for taking up space. "Mr. Briggs," Poirot said kindly, "do you know why you are here?" Briggs swallowed hard. "Matron said I was seen near the corridor last night, but I swear, Mr. Poirot, I meant no harm. I was delivering linens." "At midnight?" Hastings asked skeptically. Briggs shifted. "Well, no, not exactly. I was looking for someone." Poirot leaned forward. "Whom?" Briggs flushed. "Nurse Marsh." Evelyn gasped. "Me?" Briggs nodded miserably. I wanted to speak with you. I've been, well, fond of you." Evelyn colored, but this was clearly a surprise. Poirot maintained focus. "But instead of Nurse Marsh, whom did you see?" Briggs hesitated, then whispered, "A woman in a dark coat, leaving Dr. Vale's office." Helena Vale stiffened, but Briggs continued quickly. "I couldn't see her face, only the coat. She moved quickly, almost running." Poirot exchanged a quiet glance with Hastings. "And you said nothing," Poirot murmured. Briggs shook his head. "Who'd listen to a porter? I thought maybe it wasn't my business." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "Ah, but murder makes it your business, monsieur." Poirot paced slowly, gazing at each face in turn, Evelyn's fear, Grantham's fury, Helena's cold elegance, Briggs' shame. "Four people," he said softly. "Four truths or four lies. Perhaps both." He paused behind Dr. Grantham. "An argument with the victim, a damaged coat, a bruised ego." He moved toward Helena Vale. "A troubled marriage, a meeting days before death, powder on gloves." He gestured toward Briggs. "An anonymous woman in a coat, midnight wandering." Finally, he turned to Evelyn. "A frightened nurse who hears too much." Poirot stepped back, hands folded neatly. "I thank you all, but the truth, it remains elusive." Hastings frowned. "Then what now?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Now, mon ami, we continue to pull at the smallest threads, for the murderer has already begun to unravel." Chapter 3. The veil of motives. A quiet fog rolled across the hospital's lawn as dawn broke, thin, hesitant light slipping in through the tall ward windows like an intruder fearful of what it might find. The day shift was beginning. Nurses whispered instead of spoke, and orderlies walked as though afraid the simple rhythm of footsteps might awaken guilt sleeping somewhere in the building. Poirot, however, was fully awake. He sat in the small visitors' lounge beside the coronary ward, impeccably dressed, mustaches already groomed to symmetrical perfection. A silver tray held a pot of tea that had gone cold. Opposite him, Chief Matron Beatrice Harrowleaf, gray-eyed, erect as a spear, waited stiffly for him to begin. He did not rush. Poirot never rushed. Instead, he studied her with a mild smile, letting silence coax her discomfort into the open. It was a method he employed with the precision of a surgeon. Let the suspect reveal what they feared most. "Madam," Poirot finally began, tapping a polished finger against the armrest, "you were the last person to enter Monsieur Harcourt's room before his unfortunate demise. And yet," he lifted a brow, "you have said very little about the matter during the official questioning." Her jaw tightened. "I said all that was necessary. Mr. Harcourt was resting when I checked on him. He was alive when I left." "And how long were you with him exactly?" 2 minutes, perhaps 3. Poirot leaned forward. 3 minutes can be of great importance when a man is on the brink of death, n'est-ce pas? Her eyes flickered. "If you think I killed him, Monsieur Poirot, I suggest you say it outright." Poirot gave a soft laugh. "I think nothing of the kind, yet, but I observe, and I deduce, and I notice your manner, madame. It is most guarded." She inhaled sharply, then rose. "I have a hospital to run. If you have more questions, you may speak with me later." Poirot allowed her to leave. Her footsteps were brisk, too brisk. "Aye," he murmured. "She hides something, that one. But what? And why?" When he turned, Dr. Edmund Hale was standing in the doorway with his stethoscope still around his neck, eyes shadowed from what must have been an exhausting night. "You're wasting time with Beatrice," Hale said quietly. "She's rigid, yes, cold, yes, but she's not a murderer." Poirot rose with a smile. "Ah, doctor, you defend her quickly." Hale hesitated. "Beatrice is difficult, but she's loyal. If she wanted Harcourt dead, she would not do it under her own roof. It would go against everything she believes in." Poirot studied him. "You sound as though you know her well. We've worked together for 10 years. "And yet," Poirot said, "she has a way of knowing more about everyone here than they know of her. She is a woman of rules. And when such a woman breaks one—" His eyes glinted. "It is noticeable, mon ami." Hale rubbed his eyes. "Look, Poirot, if you want to find the killer, talk to someone with an actual motive. You have someone in mind." A long pause. "Jonathan Reed." Poirot nodded slowly. He had expected the name, but hearing it spoken aloud added weight to it. "Where might I find Monsieur Reed?" "In the rehabilitation garden. He spends every morning there." Poirot thanked him, then made his way down the hallway past carts of linen and trays of medication, turning eventually into a glass corridor that overlooked the grounds. The garden was a square of neatly arranged gravel paths, rose beds and lemon trees trimmed into perfect cones, more monastery than hospital. Jonathan Reed sat on a wooden bench hunched over a cane, face pale, one leg strapped into a metal brace. His expression was one of perpetual bitterness, the kind that had long ago set like concrete. Poirot stepped into view. "Bonjour, Monsieur Reed." Reed looked up. "You're the detective. You are well informed. I listen. Helps pass the time." His voice held a dryness edged with pain. "What do you want?" Poirot sat beside him, folding his hands. "You were overheard arguing with Monsieur Harcourt the night before he died." Reed scoffed. "I didn't argue. I begged." Poirot lifted a brow. "Begged?" Reed clenched the handle of his cane. "Harcourt was The administrator who approved or denied the funding for my surgery. He told me yesterday it was too experimental and too expensive, even though it could restore most of the function in my leg. He said I wasn't a priority. So you lost your temper. Wouldn't you? Reed snapped. Then his tone changed, darkened. But I didn't kill him, if that's what you're insinuating. Poirot kept his voice gentle. The anger, the disappointment, those I understand. But tell me, monsieur, how did you know the news? Who told you Harcourt had died? Reed blinked. A nurse, Florence. She rushed in this morning looking like someone had slapped her. Poirot made a note. Florence Whitby. That's the one, sweet girl, too sweet for this place. Poirot stood. Merci, Monsieur Reed. You have been most helpful. Reed looked up sharply. So you believe me? You don't think I had anything to do with it? Poirot smiled. I believe that you told me the truth. For the most part. Reed scowled as Poirot walked away, cane tapping anxiously on the gravel behind him. Florence Whitby was found in the pharmacy, chest rising fast with nerves as she sorted vials of morphine. A young woman with soft freckles, she carried the anxious energy of someone who feared being accused of something she barely understood. Miss Whitby, Poirot said gently, your colleague Jonathan Reed speaks highly of you. She flushed nervously. Mr. Reed is kind. And you, mademoiselle, did you often speak with Monsieur Harcourt? Her fingers hesitated on a label. I served on his patient rounds twice. He wasn't very friendly. Many are not, Poirot said. Did you see anything unusual the night he died? She shook her head. No, monsieur. Poirot narrowed his eyes. She was hiding something. Her hands trembled with guilt or fear. You told Monsieur Reed about the death this morning, Poirot said quietly. And yet you were not assigned to the ward. How did you learn of it so quickly? Her breath hitched. I shouldn't say. Poirot stepped closer. Mademoiselle, secrets are dangerous things in a place where a man has died. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I heard two people arguing outside Harcourt's room before the code was announced. Poirot's brows rose. Two? Not one? She nodded. A man and a woman. And you recognized their voices? She swallowed hard. Yes. A beat of silence. And yet, Poirot said softly, you fear to tell me. Her whisper was so soft he barely heard it. Because one of them was Dr. Edmund Hale. Poirot's expression shifted like a curtain drawn back. This he had not expected. And the woman? He asked quietly. Florence pressed trembling fingers to her lips. It was Matron Harrowleaf. Poirot stepped back, mind whirring. Dr. Hale and Matron Harrowleaf arguing together, outside Harcourt's room, minutes before he died. Merci, mademoiselle, Poirot said in a tone so smooth it masked his racing thoughts. You have been exceedingly helpful. But as he walked away, one thought pulsed with the rhythm of his steps. What secret bound those two together, and why had they kept it hidden? The fog outside thickened as if eager to swallow the truth whole. And Poirot felt with that instinct he so trusted that he had just stepped onto a path far darker than a simple administrative murder. This was no ordinary hospital, and this was no ordinary crime. Chapter 4. Whispers behind the wards. The hospital seemed to breathe with a life of its own, long mechanical sighs from the ventilation, quiet murmurs from patients drifting in and out of uneasy sleep, and the rhythmic click of nurses' shoes cutting through the hush. Yet beneath these ordinary sounds ran another layer entirely, a taut, invisible tension humming like a piano string stretched too tight. Poirot could feel it in the walls, in the glances shared between staff, in the way conversations halted the moment he entered a corridor. Secrets. He could smell them. He walked slowly toward the administrative wing, his hands clasped behind his back, footsteps measured. Every detail mattered. The out-of-place file on a desk, the hurried tone of an orderly, the circular stain on the floor where a medicine cart had been stopped too long. 6 times he paused, simply listening. Somewhere in this building lay the truth, and perhaps more than one truth. The office of Mr. Harcourt, now a sealed crime scene, was guarded by a young constable whose expression suggested that mysteries were not his preferred breakfast companion. Poirot nodded politely. "A moment only, if you please." The constable hesitated. Inspector Grant said no one was to enter. Poirot smiled. "But I do not wish to enter, I only wish to look." He leaned slightly toward the glass window, observing the dim interior. Papers scattered across Harcourt's desk. A tumbler half filled with amber liquid. A fountain pen snapped neatly in two. But what drew Poirot's eye most was the filing cabinet, one drawer not fully closed, as though someone had hurriedly removed something and failed to push it back completely. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "What is?" the constable asked, shifting uneasily. Poirot pointed. "That drawer. Does it strike you as the work of a man who kept a desk in such immaculate order?" The constable frowned. "I suppose not, sir." "Then someone searched it after his death." Poirot turned away with a thoughtful hum. "Or before." He left the young man blinking after him. Dr. Edmund Hale found him minutes later near the central staircase. The doctor's face was strained, his movements restless, like a man carrying a burden he dared not set down. "Poirot," he said in a low voice, "walk with me." They moved to the side hall, where the morning sunlight filtered through stained glass windows depicting saints and healers. Hale exhaled sharply. "I know Florence said she overheard me arguing outside Harcourt's room," he began. "Indeed," Poirot replied mildly, "and the matron also." Hale closed his eyes briefly. "It's not what it sounds like." Poirot tipped his head. "Then what does it sound like, mon ami?" Hale hesitated, visibly struggling. "Beatrice and I were discussing hospital protocols. She's strong-willed. It became heated, nothing more." "Protocols," Poirot repeated thoughtfully. "A vague word, Doctor. It can hide many sins." Hale looked away. "I have nothing to hide." "Forgive me," Poirot said softly, "but you have the expression of a man hiding everything." Before Hale could answer, a shrill crash echoed from the far end of the corridor. They both turned. Mrs. Clara Harcourt, the widow, stood shaking, a porcelain vase shattered at her feet. Her face was pale, eyes hollow as empty teacups. A nurse hurried forward, attempting to steady her. "No, no, leave me," Clara cried, stepping back. Her voice trembled on a knife edge of grief. "I don't want your help. I don't want anyone's help." Poirot approached gently. "Madame Harcourt, allow me to assist." She looked up, eyes brimming. "You," her breath hitched, "you're the detective. You promised last night that you would find out who killed my husband." "And I shall," Poirot said softly. "I keep thinking," she whispered. "This hospital swallowed him. One moment he was alive, walking these corridors, and the next—" She clasped her hands over her chest. "I am afraid, Monsieur Poirot. Afraid of what you may discover." Poirot bent his head. "When one fears the truth, madame, it is usually because one already knows part of it." Her expression flickered, fear or guilt, or simply the raw ache of grief. Then she stepped back. "I cannot speak now." She turned abruptly and walked toward the visitor's staircase, her shawl fluttering like a wounded bird behind her. Poirot watched her go. Hale spoke hesitantly beside him. "Her husband was difficult," the doctor murmured. brilliant but ruthless. We all feared his temper. Poirot tapped his chin. Does a man without enemies exist? Rarely. But Monsieur Harcourt seems to have collected them as others collect stamps. Hale's jaw tightened. If you're implying I am one— I imply nothing, Poirot interrupted. But I observe, and I have observed that you knew Harcourt better than most. Hale opened his mouth, but whatever he meant to say died on his tongue. He excused himself and walked quickly away. Poirot watched him, eyes narrowing. A man torn between duty and something far more personal, he murmured. I must know what binds him to the matron. The matron herself was found in the supply room, inventory sheets arranged with almost military precision. She froze as Poirot entered. You, she said coldly. Again. Oui, Madame Harrowleaf. Poirot smiled politely. Your presence is required, I'm afraid. I have nothing further to tell you. Poirot approached slowly, tapping the edge of a shelf with one gloved finger. Florence Whitby heard the argument you had with Dr. Hale, just before the death of Monsieur Harcourt. The matron's eyes flashed with alarm, a brief, unmistakable glint. That girl listens too much, she said through clenched teeth. Poirot leaned closer. She said you and the doctor argued together. That is very interesting. I am curious what binds you, madame. A secret, a shared fear? His voice softened. Or perhaps a shared past. Her throat worked as she swallowed. That is none of your concern, she said stiffly. Poirot stepped back. On the contrary, madame. Everything inside these walls is my concern. A man has died. Murder is not tidy. It leaves a trail of disorder, and you, he gestured lightly, you strive always for order. Her composure cracked, just enough for Poirot to see the fracture. You have no idea what you are dealing with, she whispered. Poirot smiled gently. Then you must enlighten me. But she shut the ledger with a thud. I will not. Poirot watched as she brushed past him. Her footsteps betrayed the truth more than her words. She was afraid, terrified, which meant one thing. She knew something, and whatever it was, it struck at the very heart of the hospital. Poirot returned to the visitors' lounge with a notebook full of observations. He sat down, smoothing the page with care. Now, he murmured, let us put order to the chaos. He tapped his pen. So many motives, so many lies. Then he wrote one last line. There is something rotten at the heart of this hospital. As he closed the notebook, the door creaked softly behind him. Poirot turned, only to find no one there. Just an empty hallway, and a soft whisper drifting through it, as though the hospital itself were speaking. Find the truth, if you dare. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Records Room. The records archive of St. Augustine's Hospital lay at the end of a long, unlit corridor, a quiet, neglected artery of the building where dust gathered like whispered secrets. Few ventured there except the night staff and the clerks who preferred paper to people. For Poirot, however, archives were holy ground. Files did not lie. Papers did not shift nervously or break into tears. They simply waited to be read by someone meticulous enough to notice the inconsistencies. And Hercule Poirot was very meticulous indeed. He descended the final stairwell and paused at the door. A sign read, Authorized personnel only. Poirot smiled. Ah, I am precisely that, thanks to Inspector Grant. He produced the small brass key the inspector had reluctantly granted him. Now, let us see what you hide, mon ami. The lock turned with a soft click. The room beyond was long and narrow, filled floor to ceiling with shelves of records, logbooks, and locked cabinets. A faint smell of paper, ink, and mildew hung in the air. One flick of the switch brought a warm, honey-colored glow from a single overhead bulb. Poirot closed the door behind him. He began his search with Harcourt's file stored alphabetically in a meticulously kept section of administrative personnel. It was thinner than expected. Thin, yes, but it bulges in the wrong place, Poirot murmured, running a finger along the spine. Ah, someone removed pages recently. Not torn, lifted. The faint indentation of staples told the tale. He flipped through the remaining papers, contracts, performance reviews, letters from the Board of Trustees. One document caught his eye, an audit request signed by Harcourt dated 3 days before his death. It concerned irregularities in the hospital's inventory, specifically controlled medications. Poirot felt a ripple of satisfaction. A financial motive, perhaps? Or a cover-up, but by whom? He slid the audit request into his notebook. Then something made him pause, a faint disturbance in the otherwise immaculate shelf below. 2 folders were misaligned. He crouched. The label on the first folder read, Hale, Edmund, Doctor. The second, Harrowleaf, Beatrice, Matron. Poirot lifted the doctor's file first. It opened with standard medical practice credentials, commendations, training history. But halfway through, Mais non, Poirot murmured, eyes narrowing. This is curious. A disciplinary notice, filed quietly, marked confidential. Dr. Hale had been reprimanded 2 years earlier for an incident involving the overdose of a patient during surgery. The incident had been buried under procedural ambiguity, but the matron's name appeared in the internal correspondence, defending him. Poirot stood very still. A mistake, or a protection, he whispered. He turned to Matron Harrowleaf's file. Her record was pristine, too pristine. Not a single reprimand, note, or complaint in 20 years of service. Poirot knew better. No woman commands a hospital ward with an iron fist without stepping on some toes. But something else drew his attention. At the very back of the file was a sealed envelope marked, Strictly Confidential, to be opened by the board only. Poirot considered it. His fingers hovered above the flap. To open it would be a breach of the inspector's trust. To leave it unopened might cost him the truth. As he deliberated, the overhead light flickered once, twice, before steadying. Poirot looked up sharply. Ah, someone does not like that I am here. He tucked the envelope into the folder but did not open it. Not yet. He had seen enough. He replaced the files and turned toward the exit. Halfway to the door, he stopped. The knob was turning. Poirot froze. Someone was entering. He retreated behind a tall shelf, slipping silently into the shadowed aisle. A soft creak. A sliver of yellow hallway light widened into the room. A figure stepped inside. Poirot recognized the silhouette immediately. Thin, angular, purposeful. Matron Harrowleaf. Her expression was unreadable in the dim light. She walked directly toward the shelf containing her file. Her movements were brisk, almost desperate. Poirot watched silently from the dark. The matron pulled her file out quickly and scanned through it. Her breath hitched when she reached the back section, the sealed envelope. She turned it over, eyes darting around. Still here, she whispered. Thank God. Poirot stepped forward. Madame Harrowleaf, he said softly. She gasped, nearly dropping the folder. Monsieur Poirot, how long have you been there? Long enough to observe that this envelope concerns you greatly. Her mouth tightened into a thin line. It is private. Of course, but privacy becomes secrecy when a murder intrudes. She pressed the folder to her chest. You have no right to interrogate me here. This is my hospital. Poirot shook his head gently. It was Monsieur Harcourt's hospital, and now he is dead. Her nostrils flared. For a moment her composure wavered like a mask slipping. Poirot seized the moment. Tell me, madame, what binds you to Dr. Hale? Why does he protect you? Why do you protect him? Her voice cracked. We do not... Poirot cut in smoothly. Do not insult me, madame. Florence Whitby heard you both. She looked away. Florence should learn to mind her duties. Poirot softened his tone. I do not believe you wish harm to your hospital. But you hide something. And when people hide secrets in the presence of murder, it is rarely harmless. The matron's shoulders sagged, only slightly, but enough to reveal that the iron spine had a human heart beneath it. I cannot tell you, she whispered. Poirot stepped closer. Cannot. Or will not. A long, agonizing silence. Finally, the matron spoke, very quietly. There are things in this hospital, Monsieur Poirot, that you do not understand. Things that Harcourt intended to expose. Things that could destroy careers, reputations, even lives. And perhaps, Poirot said gently, that is why someone killed him. She paled. Poirot waited for her to elaborate, but she did not. Instead, she snapped her file shut. I must go. She moved toward the door, her steps brisk and trembling. Poirot watched her leave. He waited 5 full seconds, then turned back to the shelves. One file sat slightly askew. Dr. Hale's. Poirot pulled it free again, scanning the pages until he found a slip of paper he had missed the first time. A small folded note tucked between 2 reports. He opened it carefully. A single sentence stared back at him. We cannot let him uncover the truth. B.H. Poirot's eyebrows rose in a slow arc. Beatrice Harrowleaf, writing about Harcourt. And about what truth? Poirot slipped the note into his pocket as he exited the archives. Above him, the hospital lights flickered again. Longer this time. It felt as though the building itself were warning him, or begging him. Stop now. Or go deeper. Poirot stepped into the dim corridor, mustaches bristling with determination. He would go deeper. After all, Hercule Poirot never turned away from the truth. Chapter 6. The witness in the night ward night descended upon St. Augustine's with a slow, suffocating weight. The hospital's long corridors, bright and bustling during the day, fell quiet, the lights dimming to a muted amber glow that cast long, warped shadows across the linoleum floors. In the silence, the building felt older, more watchful, as though the plaster walls had grown ears, eager for secrets. Poirot had not left the hospital since dawn. Fatigue tugged at his bones, but his mind remained sharp, restless. The note he had found in Dr. Hale's file. We cannot let him uncover the truth. B.H. had sat in his pocket like a burning coal. The matron denied knowledge. Hale claimed innocence. Harcourt had uncovered something worth killing for. And one person inside this hospital had seen more than she admitted. Florence Whitby. Poirot found her in the dimly lit night ward where only a skeleton staff remained. She stood beside a sleeping patient, adjusting an IV line with trembling hands. Her face was pale, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Bonsoir, Mademoiselle Whitby, Poirot began softly. She flinched, nearly dropping the IV clamp. Monsieur Poirot, you frightened me. He inclined his head apologetically. It was not my intention. I merely wish to ask you one more question. Her lips pressed together. I've told you everything. Poirot smiled gently. Forgive me, but you have told me everything you felt safe to share. There is a difference, and now the hour is late, and the truth she prefers the night time, when lies begin to yawn. Florence swallowed hard. Please, not here. Poirot glanced around. The ward was nearly empty, just one elderly man dozing in a chair by the window, and a young woman in a bed with her back to them. We may speak in the staff observation room, Florence said quietly. It's empty at this hour. Poirot followed her inside. A small space with a single desk lamp illuminating charts and a half-finished crossword puzzle. Florence closed the door and leaned against it, wringing her fingers. "I heard them, arguing," she whispered, voice trembling. "But that wasn't all." Poirot watched her closely. "Go on, mademoiselle." "I was delivering medication," she said, "and passed by the corridor outside Mr. Harcourt's room. I heard Dr. Hale and Matron Harrowleaf. They sounded angry, really angry." Poirot nodded, encouraging her. "They weren't arguing about protocols," Florence continued. "It was about finances." "Finances?" Poirot lifted a brow. Florence nodded. "Dr. Hale said something like, 'If he publishes the figures, the board will shut down half the departments.' And the matron said, her voice caught, 'We can't let him do that. We've worked too hard.'" Poirot's mind sharpened with curiosity. "And then the matron saw me," Florence whispered, voice breaking. "She came straight toward me with this look, hard, cold. She told me to return to my station immediately. I've never heard her speak in that tone." Poirot clasped his hands. "And afterward? Did either of them re-enter Harcourt's room?" Florence shook her head. "I don't know. I was too scared to pass the corridor again." Poirot considered this carefully. "Tell me, mademoiselle, did you hear any other voices near the room?" Florence hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes." Poirot leaned forward. "Whose?" Her voice dropped to a fearful whisper. "Clara Harcourt." Poirot felt a chill, subtle yet undeniable, settle beneath his ribs. "You are certain?" "She was crying," Florence said, "begging someone to listen to her, saying she had something to confess." Poirot's eyes widened. "And did she enter the room?" Florence nodded. "Yes, 5 minutes before the crash alarm." Poirot exhaled slowly. Matron Harrowleaf, Dr. Hale, Clara Harcourt, all present in the corridor that night, a perfect storm of secrets. "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot said, rising. "You have given me much to consider." Florence reached out suddenly and clutched his sleeve. "Monsieur Poirot, please, be careful. People are frightened, not just because of the murder, because of something else, something happening in this hospital." Poirot's brows arched. "What do you mean, frightened?" She bit her lip hard. "I've heard whispers, some medicines missing, some files altered, patients moved without explanation. And the night before Harcourt died, someone was in the pharmacy cabinet after hours." Poirot's pulse quickened. "Someone?" She nodded. "A man. But I didn't see his face." Poirot placed a reassuring hand over hers. "You are brave to speak, mademoiselle." As he stepped toward the door, Florence called after him. "Whatever Harcourt found, I think it terrified him." Poirot paused in the doorway. "He was talking to someone on the phone," she said. "Yesterday, before he died, he said, 'You don't understand. If this leaks, it will destroy us all.'" Poirot stepped out into the ward again, deep in thought, and then a soft click. He turned. The elderly man in the corner was no longer sleeping. He sat upright now, watching Poirot intently with unnervingly alert eyes, blue and sharp despite his age. His hands trembled slightly, the way of someone long familiar with illness or with fear. Poirot approached slowly. "Bonsoir, monsieur. You are awake?" The old man nodded. "I heard everything," he whispered. Poirot crouched beside him. "Then perhaps you have something to tell me." The old man swallowed, throat bobbing like a trapped bird. "I saw someone, you know." Poirot's concentration sharpened. "On the night of the murder?" The old man nodded again. "Someone who shouldn't have been near that room at all." Poirot's voice softened. "Who, monsieur?" The old man's breath trembled out of him. "The one nobody suspects. Poirot leaned closer. "And who is that?" But before the man could answer, a sudden spasm seized him. He gasped, clutching at his chest, eyes bulging with panic. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot cried. "Nurse! Nurse!" Florence rushed over, but the man's body slumped sideways, trembling. Seconds later, he sagged back into the chair, eyes open but empty. Florence pressed a trembling hand to his throat, then looked up at Poirot. "He's gone." Poirot's eyes narrowed, not from fear, from certainty. The man had not simply died. Something had silenced him. And whatever he had been about to reveal, it was worth killing for. Chapter 7. Poirot hears the dead speak. The death, no, the silencing of the elderly witness rippled through Poirot's mind like ice on a winter pond, cracking outward in jagged, inevitable lines. It happened too quickly. A healthy enough man 1 second, a lifeless body the next. No warning, no struggle. Poirot stood at the man's side long after Florence had drawn the curtain around the chair. Nurses scurried into the ward, whispering in low, uneasy voices. But Poirot heard none of it. His gaze had narrowed upon the man's neck, just beneath the left ear. A pinprick, almost invisible, but nothing was invisible to Hercule Poirot. When Matron Harrowleaf swept in moments later, all crisp starch and authority, Poirot did not move. "Another tragedy," she said, voice heavy. Poor Mr. Cole was frail. His heart— "Non," Poirot said softly. "It was not the heart that failed him." She blinked. "I beg your pardon?" Poirot straightened and looked at her with the mild smile that meant danger. "You will forgive me, Madame Harrowleaf, if I say that you rush too quickly to a conclusion. The little gray cells, they do not enjoy such haste." The matron stiffened. "Monsieur Poirot, this is a hospital. Men of his age die unexpectedly every day." "Perhaps," Poirot murmured, "but not 30 seconds after overhearing a conversation about murder." Her lips tightened. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Ah," Poirot said, "but you do." He let the words settle like dust in sunlight before turning away, leaving her pale and silent beside the curtain. Poirot exited the ward, walking the hallway slowly, his hands clasped neatly behind his back. Every footstep echoed against the cold floors. The hospital at night was a maze of shadows, but it was within such shadows that truth often whispered the loudest. He replayed Mr. Cole's last words, "the one nobody suspects," a phrase that delighted and irritated him in equal measure. Anyone could be the unsuspected one, Clara Harcourt, fragile yet hiding something. Dr. Hale, too calm for a man under suspicion. Matron Harrowleaf, masking fear beneath crisp authority. Or someone else entirely, someone who slipped through corridors without casting a shadow. Poirot paused before the stairwell leading to the lower levels. Harcourt's research was missing. His financial reports were buried. His phone's call logs wiped clean. And now, a witness lay dead. Something larger was at play. He descended the stairs. The hospital archives in the basement were a stark, silent world. Metal shelving, dusty files, and the faint hum of electrical wiring. A single flickering tube light buzzed overhead. Poirot, with the blessing, or rather resignation, of the bewildered night clerk, slipped inside. He had come to find Harcourt's earlier audit reports, those that had not been tampered with. He found them easily. Harcourt's handwriting, precise, slanted, familiar after hours spent studying it, covered the pages. At first glance, the financial entries seemed unremarkable. Expenses, supplies, departmental allowances, but then Poirot's eyes narrowed. 3 departments had irregularities: pharmacy, cardiology, pediatrics. Irregularities over several months. Small amounts missing here and there, likely ignored by anyone except a meticulous man such as Harcourt. "Someone has sticky fingers," Poirot muttered. But it was not mere theft. The amounts were too small to tempt ordinary greed. No, this was about concealment, hiding something in the budget, something dangerous. Poirot turned another page. A notation caught his eye, scrawled hastily in Harcourt's margin. If even half of this is true, they'll shut us down. BH knows, HH suspects. Poirot repeated the initials. BH. Bertrand Hale, he murmured. HH. Harrowleaf. So, Hale knew everything. Harrowleaf suspected something, but then something stranger. DP is the key. Must speak to him before I confront the board. DP? Poirot whispered. He scanned the hospital registry and the binder beside the file. No staff member, no consultant, no vendor with those initials. A ghost, or someone using an alias. Poirot closed the folder and slipped it beneath his coat. Footsteps echoed faintly outside the archive room. Poirot stiffened. Someone else was down here. He extinguished the desk lamp and pressed himself behind a tall shelf. The footsteps approached, measured, purposeful, then stopped outside the door. Poirot held his breath. A hand tested the handle. It clicked open. A tall figure entered, silhouetted by the hallway lights. The person wore dark scrubs. Their face was obscured by a surgical mask pulled unnecessarily high. They looked around the room, scanning it with quick, trained eyes. Not a nurse, not a clerk. Someone searching for files. Poirot's hand tightened on the folder under his coat. The figure approached the desk, rifling through drawers, then pulling out a flashlight to inspect the catalogs. They were looking for Harcourt's audit reports. Poirot reached into his pocket, intending to drop something small, his silver tie pin, across the floor behind them to create a distraction. But before he could, a loud clang echoed from somewhere down the corridor. The figure froze, then bolted, disappearing into darkness. Poirot exhaled slowly. He waited for his heartbeat to settle, then stepped into the corridor. It was empty, except a scrap of fabric fluttered on a sharp metal hinge of the archive doorframe. Poirot lifted it delicately. Dark blue, rough texture, cotton, the kind used in janitorial uniforms. But that was not the important detail. No. The important detail was that it smelled faintly, very faintly, of antiseptic and camphor oil. Poirot's brows rose. Camphor oil, used by only one type of staff member in St. Augustine's Hospital, respiratory therapists. Poirot's mind clicked with quiet revelation. The one nobody suspects. A person in the hospital every hour, moving between wards silently, invisible because they were always supposed to be there. A respiratory therapist could access any room, enter without question, carry small vials, small syringes, even the tools to stop a heart quietly. Poirot folded the fabric into his pocket. He now had a direction, a shadow given form. As he returned to the main floors, dawn approached, the windows paling with the first brushing of morning light. At the staff entrance, a man in a beige jacket passed him, carrying a clipboard. His face was unremarkable, pleasant, ordinary. He nodded politely at Poirot. Poirot nodded back, then paused. That face, that jacket, that calmness. He had seen this man before, in the background, always moving, always watching. "Excusez-moi, monsieur," Poirot began, but the man had already disappeared around the corner. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "DP," he whispered, the initials from Harcourt's note. The key, the man who was always present and never noticed, the one nobody suspects. Chapter 8. The Breath of Death. Morning announced itself with a pale, diluted sunlight that crept reluctantly into St. Augustine's Hospital. But even in daylight, the building felt dim, like a great beast that had swallowed secrets whole and refused to digest them. Poirot stood before the tall glass doors of the respiratory therapy wing. The ward hummed with soft machinery. The sigh of ventilators, the rhythmic pulse of nebulizers, and the occasional mechanical hiss that sounded like a whisper escaping between clenched teeth. It was a place of careful breaths, labored breaths, stolen breaths, and, Poirot suspected, breaths deliberately ended. He straightened his tie and entered. The morning shift bustled with activity. Respiratory therapists moved between patients, checking charts, adjusting tubing, replacing oxygen canisters. They worked with quiet efficiency, invisible, essential. Poirot's gaze moved over each face carefully, but he did not see the man from earlier, the man with the beige jacket and the polite, unremarkable smile. "May I assist you, sir?" a young therapist asked. Her badge read Rita Collins. Poirot returned a courteous smile. "Ah, mademoiselle, I am seeking a gentleman who works in this department. Tall, perhaps in his late 30s, with the initials DP. She frowned. "DP? No one here with those initials." Her answer was too quick, too definitive. Poirot tilted his head. "You are certain?" "We have a Daniel Preston," she said reluctantly. "But he's night shift. Hardly anyone sees him." "Ah," Poirot murmured. "The invisible one. Très intéressant." She hesitated. "Is he in trouble?" "Not at all," Poirot lied smoothly. "I merely wish to speak with him regarding a discrepancy in patient schedules." The young woman bit her lip. "He should be clocking out soon. He uses the east stairwell to avoid the crowd." Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle, you have been most helpful." He left the ward, slipping toward the east stairwell with rapid, silent steps. The stairwell was deserted, cool, gray, wrapped in the smell of metal and disinfectant. Footsteps echoed faintly from above. Poirot ascended. At the landing of the second floor, he found him, Daniel Preston, leaning casually against the railing, holding a stainless steel thermos about to descend. He looked exactly as Poirot remembered. Ordinary, unthreatening, perfectly forgettable. His eyes, however, were not ordinary. They were quick, sharp, measuring. "Good morning, Monsieur Preston," Poirot said pleasantly. Daniel stiffened. "Sir, do I know you?" "No," Poirot replied, "but you know of me." The man blinked, masking surprise with excessive politeness. "Can I help you?" "Yes. I should like to have a few words." Daniel's grip tightened around the thermos. "About what?" Poirot's gaze flicked to the small indentation on the man's collar, a faint smear of blue fiber. The same color as the cloth torn at the archive door. "I believe you were in the basement archives last night," Poirot said softly. Daniel's expression did not change, but his pulse, visible at the throat, jumped. "You're mistaken," he said quickly. "I was on rounds." Poirot smiled. "Mais, non, mon ami. You were looking for Mr. Harcourt's audit files." Silence thickened the stairwell like smoke. Daniel inhaled sharply. His voice softened into something cold, almost clinical. "You shouldn't stick your nose into things you don't understand." Poirot raised a brow. "I understand more than you think. For instance, the small puncture on Mr. Cole's neck." Daniel said nothing. Poirot continued. "A respiratory therapist carries many tools. Ventilator tubing, nebulizer syringes, airway needles, a tiny injection, just a whisper, and the heart stops." He tapped his own neck lightly. "A delicate pressure, perfectly placed." Daniel's eyes hardened. "You have no proof." "No," Poirot admitted, "but I have curiosity, and the curiosity, it is a very powerful thing." Daniel took a step closer, too close. He smiled thinly. "Curiosity kills more than cats, Mr. Poirot." Poirot felt his heart beat faster, not with fear, but with recognition. Here was danger, real danger. He studied Daniel with quiet fascination. "You knew Mr. Harcourt," Poirot said gently. "He wrote your initials. He called you the key." Why? Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, a brief tremor of panic. Then he laughed, but the laughter was hollow. You don't know anything. Then enlighten me, Poirot said softly. But Daniel didn't. He bolted. The chase through the stairwell was swift, silent, and perilous. Daniel launched down the metal steps with the athletic ease of a man accustomed to moving quickly in tight spaces. Poirot followed, not with speed, but with certainty. Daniel burst onto the ground floor corridor and wove through early shift staff. Poirot emerged seconds later, breath steady, scanning. There, Daniel slipped into a supply room. Poirot hurried to the door and pushed inside. Empty, but the window at the back was open, its blinds fluttering weakly in the morning breeze. Poirot exhaled, not with frustration but with satisfaction. For Daniel Preston had made a mistake. On the counter sat his stainless steel thermos, forgotten in his panic. Poirot approached it carefully. He sniffed the rim. A faint odor, sharp, medicinal, unmistakable. Ah, he whispered, isoflurane, a powerful anesthetic, colorless, nearly undetectable, in the wrong hands, lethal. Poirot picked up the thermos using a clean gauze pad. Daniel Preston was a killer, but not yet the murderer of Harcourt. Poirot felt that in his bones. Daniel was dangerous, yes, but he was not the architect. He was an instrument, a tool. Someone else pulled the strings. Someone who knew Harcourt threatened exposure. Someone who silenced a witness before he could speak. Someone who used Daniel as an invisible blade. A shadow behind the shadow. Poirot locked the thermos inside a staff storage cabinet, tucked the key into his pocket, and walked out. He knew what he must do. If Daniel Preston was the hand, Poirot now needed to find the brain. As he stepped into the main hall, Clara Harcourt appeared, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. Monsieur Poirot, someone just tried to break into my late husband's office. A man in dark scrubs. Poirot almost smiled at the precision of fate. Then, madam, he said, offering his arm, you and I must talk, for the danger grows urgent. And as they hurried together across the hall, Poirot looked back once toward the stairwell where Daniel Preston had vanished. The nurse tending a nearby cart shivered suddenly, though she could not say why. For a predator had been revealed. And yet, the true predator still wore its mask. Chapter 9. The Master of Shadows. Clara Harcourt led Poirot to her husband's private office, her grip trembling against his sleeve. The hallway was unusually quiet, as though the hospital itself were holding its breath. She fumbled with the key, nearly dropping it. Steady, madam, Poirot murmured. Panic clouds the little gray cells. She inhaled shakily, pushed the door open, and stepped aside. Poirot entered first. The office was dim, the blinds half drawn, dust swirling like spectral threads in the morning light. Benjamin Harcourt's desk sat centered in the room, the surface disrupted, papers scattered, drawers half open. Someone had searched feverishly, but not wisely. Poirot crouched near the bottom drawer. They seek something they fear exists, he said. Which means, it exists. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth. Monsieur Poirot, what is happening here? Why target my husband's work, and why now? Poirot stood slowly, brushing dust from his knees. Because Benjamin Harcourt began to understand what the hospital wished to hide. Clara blinked through her confusion. The hospital? Poirot's tone softened. Not the hospital as an institution. The hospital as people. A network. A quiet alliance. She sank into a chair. He never told me anything. Only that he felt unsafe. Poirot nodded. He wrote as much in his audit notes. He knew the danger grew. He studied her face carefully. Clara Harcourt was no liar. Her grief was too raw, too real. If she knew more, it was buried deep within her unconscious, not her intentions. Poirot turned to the window. Below, doctors moved about the courtyard. Nurses wheeled carts. An orderly laughed loudly at a poor joke. The world appeared normal. But normality was always the best disguise. Poirot spoke without turning. "Madame, did your husband ever mention a name? A figure? Someone who opposed his audits?" Clara hesitated, then, "There was someone," she whispered. "A member of the board. He mentioned her once, said she was formidable." Poirot turned sharply. "She?" Clara nodded. "Henrietta Harrowleaf." The matron. Poirot felt a click of realization echo through his mind like a lock turning. "Madame Harrowleaf," he said softly. "Voilà, the connection." Leaving Clara with a nurse, Poirot marched with renewed vigor through the corridors, cane tapping decisively. His direction, the administrative tower. Matron Harrowleaf's office sat at the end of a quiet hallway, a glass window framing neat rows of filing cabinets. The placard on the door gleamed, "Henrietta Harrowleaf, Chief of Clinical Operations and Board Secretary." Poirot knocked once. "Enter," came the brisk reply. He opened the door. Matron Harrowleaf sat behind her desk, posture regal, hands folded. She regarded him not with fear but annoyance. "Poirot," she said crisply, "you are interfering." "Mais oui," he replied pleasantly. "It is my specialty." She exhaled sharply. "I know what you're here for. Clara Harcourt ran to you with dramatics, I'm sure. But whatever she told you is nonsense." Poirot remained standing. "Madame," he said, "last night a man died in the ward. A witness. He died just after overhearing a conversation regarding murder." Harrowleaf's fingers tightened, almost imperceptibly. "And this morning," Poirot continued, "Daniel Preston attempted to flee after I confronted him. He searched Harcourt's files. He had with him a thermos laced with isoflurane." The matron's face froze. Poirot leaned slightly forward. "He is your agent, n'est-ce pas?" Her eyes flashed. "I don't handle criminals." "Ah, but you handle everyone else. You move like a puppeteer behind curtains. You adjust staff assignments, alter supply requisitions, approve departmental budgets. Nothing happens without your approval." She stood abruptly. "You're accusing me of orchestrating some sort of conspiracy? A murder?" Poirot folded his hands serenely. "I accuse you of concealing something far more practical, something Harcourt discovered, something that, if exposed, would end your career." Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Harrowleaf's voice lowered, quieter but sharper than a scalpel. "You think I killed Benjamin?" "I do not know," Poirot said, "but I know you feared what he uncovered. The vandalism of his reports, the erasures, the irregular budgets, pharmacy, cardiology, pediatrics, funds redirected." Her chin lifted. "You imply embezzlement." Poirot smiled. "No. Embezzlement is too crude. This, what you hid, is subtler, more dangerous." She frowned. "What then?" Poirot stepped toward the window. "Medicine, madame. Supplies. Critical stock unaccounted for. Drugs recorded as dispensed, but no patient ever received them." Harrowleaf's eyes twitched. Poirot turned to face her fully. "Someone is diverting drugs." Her breath caught. "And Benjamin Harcourt," he continued, "found proof he believed would shut down half the hospital." The matron's facade, so long immovable, finally cracked. She sank into her chair, eyes closing. Poirot waited. After a long, brittle minute, she spoke. "It wasn't me." Poirot nodded slowly. "But you suspected?" She nodded faintly. "Preston, yes, I knew he had access. He often stayed late. handled equipment unsupervised, and there were whispers about missing medication. But I thought he was only stealing for himself, or selling to addicts. Poirot raised an eyebrow. And you allowed this? She winced. If the board discovered theft on my watch, my career would be over. I hoped it would resolve quietly. Poirot sighed. Madame Harrowleaf, you play with fire and act surprised the house burns. Her eyes glistened. But I did not kill Benjamin, and I did not order Mr. Cole's death. Poirot believed her. Harrowleaf was strict, ambitious, sometimes ruthless, but not murderous. Her fear came from self-preservation, not guilt. There was still one piece missing. Who else knew of Harcourt's findings? Poirot asked. She swallowed. Only 3 people had access to his internal memos, myself, Dr. Hale. She hesitated. And one other. Who? The board's financial auditor. The hospital's external reviewer. Poirot stilled. The external reviewer. Daniel Preston was not the mastermind. Harrowleaf was not the architect. A financial auditor, someone with oversight of numbers, supply chains, and drug inventories, would have every tool needed to manipulate data undetected. Name, Poirot said sharply. Harrowleaf whispered it like a confession. Dorian Penrose. Poirot's heart dropped. D.P. Not Daniel Preston. Dorian Penrose. The polite, smiling man Poirot had passed earlier. The one he had mistaken for a harmless clerk. The one who moved silently from office to office with perfect legitimacy. A man invisible not because he blended in, but because everyone trusted him. Poirot exhaled. Harrowleaf, where is he now? She stood, color draining from her face. His office is across from the surgical wing, 2nd floor. Poirot bowed once. Then I must go, for we have allowed the shadow to walk free long enough. He turned toward the door. Poirot, Harrowleaf whispered, trembling, be careful. Poirot paused, giving her a small, reassuring nod. Madame Hercule Poirot is always careful. But even as he said it, he felt it. A chill of foreboding. For the true mastermind was cornered, and a cornered animal is always dangerous. Chapter 10. The Cure for Silence. The corridors outside the surgical wing felt unnaturally still, as though the building sensed the truth was finally creeping into daylight. Hercule Poirot walked with measured steps, each tap of his shoes echoing like a ticking clock counting down the final moments before revelation. Dorian Penrose's office sat between 2 supply rooms, an ideal place for a man with secrets to pass unnoticed. The nameplate gleamed modestly. Dorian Penrose, Chief External Auditor External, a man who oversaw everything and belonged to nothing, a man trusted implicitly because he wore the disguise of impartiality. Poirot knocked gently, no reply. He tried the handle, unlocked. He entered. The office was immaculate, too immaculate. Surfaces gleamed. Papers stood arranged with geometric precision. Nothing on the desk but a fountain pen, a ledger, and a cup of coffee still steaming faintly. Poirot stepped closer. The ledger was open to a page of falsified drug inventories, numbers entered with elegant handwriting. Not Daniel Preston's rushed scrawl. These were the entries of a meticulous mind. Dorian Penrose's mind. Poirot touched the coffee cup, still warm. He is close. Poirot turned and found himself staring down the barrel of a long silver syringe, not a gun, but just as deadly. Dorian Penrose stood in the doorway. His beige jacket hung neatly from his narrow frame. His polite smile remained, but now it resembled a crack in thin ice. Monsieur Poirot, he said softly, I had hoped you would leave this alone. Poirot clasped his hands calmly. Ah, but you hoped in vain. Where there is disorder, Hercule Poirot restores the symmetry. Penrose stepped inside, closing the door with a controlled click. You should have stayed with your suspicions about Preston. He's reckless, emotional, A perfect scapegoat. Poirot tapped his chin. So you manipulated the young man, used him to retrieve files, to intimidate witnesses, perhaps even to kill them, all the while keeping your own hands clean. Penrose's smile widened. You see? You are very good, but not good enough to stop me. Poirot gestured toward the ledger. You diverted medication, opioids, anesthetics, controlled substances. But to what purpose? Profit. For the first time, Penrose's expression flickered with genuine emotion. Not profit, he said coldly. Power. He moved closer, syringe glinting in the fluorescent light. Hospitals bleed money. People make mistakes. Administrators panic. But with control over drug supplies, over who gets what and when, one becomes indispensable, even feared. Poirot bowed his head slightly. And Benjamin Harcourt discovered this. Penrose's jaw tightened. He found numbers that did not belong. And he confronted me. I warned him to let it go. Poirot's voice was gentle. He was not the sort to look away. No, Penrose agreed. He wasn't. He lifted the syringe. Poirot did not flinch. You killed him. Yes, Penrose said simply. A small overdose administered during a routine visit. Easy to mask. Harcourt died confused, painless. It was almost merciful. Poirot's eyes blazed. Murder is never merciful. Penrose shrugged one shoulder. Mr. Cole was unfortunate. Wrong place, wrong time. Preston was supposed to scare him into silence, but the old fool panicked. Things escalated. Poirot felt a wave of cold fury settle beneath his immaculate composure. Daniel Preston is now a loose thread, Poirot said. Will you snip him too? Penrose's smile returned, thin as a razor. Of course, eventually. He raised the syringe slightly. And now, the final nuisance. Poirot sighed dramatically. Mon ami, you force my hand, and I do dislike being forced. Penrose hesitated, confused. Poirot reached into his pocket. Do not move, Penrose warned. Poirot froze theatrically. Ah, you think I withdraw a weapon? A gun? No, no, Poirot does not sully his hands so. He pulled out a silver whistle. Penrose blinked. What? Poirot blew it sharply. The sound was shrill, piercing, but it wasn't meant for human ears. Within seconds, a thunderous clatter erupted behind the office door. Feet pounded. Voices shouted. Penrose spun toward the noise, but too late. The door burst open. Dr. Hale, Matron Harrowleaf, 2 hospital security officers, and Clara Harcourt herself, pale but determined. Clara's voice cracked like a whip. That is the man who killed my husband. Penrose lunged for the window, but Hale tackled him. The syringe skittered across the floor, glinting uselessly. Security pinned him down. Poirot stepped forward, adjusting his cuffs as though preparing for afternoon tea. Dorian Penrose, he said softly. You played with lives as though they were numbers in a ledger, but numbers they are not. They are people, and Hercule Poirot defends the people. Penrose snarled as he was dragged upright. You think you've won? This hospital is corrupt from top to bottom. Exposing me will only scratch the surface. Poirot smiled serenely. Then, monsieur, we shall scratch. And scratch. And continue to scratch until all the rot beneath the surface is revealed. Penrose glared at him as security hauled him away. The door slammed. Silence fell. Clara broke into trembling sobs, sinking to her knees. Poirot placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Justice comes, madame, he said softly. It moves slowly like a careful surgeon, but it comes. She looked up at him through tears. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. My husband, he would have been grateful. Poirot inclined his head. And now, truly he may rest. Later, as the sun cast long golden bars across the hospital courtyard, Poirot stood outside, breathing cool morning air. Dr. Hale approached him quietly. "You saved us all." If Penrose had continued unchecked, Poirot raised a finger. "Do not thank me, Doctor. Thank Benjamin Harcourt. It was his courage, his integrity that began this investigation. I merely completed his work." Hale nodded solemnly. Matron Harrowleaf joined them, her stern face softened. "Monsieur Poirot, I owe you an apology. I let fear corrupt my judgment." Poirot gave her a small bow. "Then learn from the failing, madame. Reform begins with the acknowledgement of weakness." She nodded. Poirot turned to watch the rising sun illuminate the eastern wing windows. "Crime, corruption, deception," he murmured. "They flourish where truth is hidden. But bring truth into the light, and even the greatest shadows disappear." Clara Harcourt stepped beside him. "Will you stay for the inquest?" Poirot smiled warmly. "Alas, madame, Hercule Poirot is always needed elsewhere. But if ever you should require me again, you need only send word. I do not abandon my friends." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you." Poirot adjusted his hat, straightened his tie, and strode toward the hospital gates. Another case closed, another wrong set right, another knot untangled by the little gray cells. The great detective walked into the morning, elegant and precise as ever. And St. Augustine's Hospital, once shrouded in shadow, breathed freely again.